This is News Central, and I'm Tolulokwe Adila Balogun. On Saturday, October 24th, 2020, gunmen entered a school in Kumba, Cameroon, and opened fire. 7 children were killed in the attack, and several more were wounded. The shooting brought renewed attention to the area of Cameroon where separatist armed groups have been fighting government forces for about 4 years. To discuss the Anglophone crisis, also known as the Ambazonia War, I have Ruth Kweti. She is an award-winning Cameroonian actress, producer, and filmmaker. I also have Kathleen Ndomo. She is a communication and digital media strategist and is a policy advisor for African governments and various agencies. Ruth, Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. In 2016, lawyers and teachers and many others in Cameroon's largely Anglophone Northwest and Southwest regions took to the streets to protest against the dominance of French in the education and legal systems. There were echoes of long-standing grievances in the region. So Ruth, just paint us a picture of what things looked like in 2016.
In 2016, it started a little bit slowly where the government had just announced that they were planning to change the common law system and introduce a French system. And common law, mind you, provides you any defendant to be innocent until proven guilty. Anybody accused, anything you're looking for, they're out to guide you and protect you. Whereas the French system protects the accuser. So every individual in the country is like at risk. And that's what the lawyers were going up against, and also the teachers were complaining, because most of the time, if you look at the way Cameroon is structured, it's 70% French speaking and 30% English speaking. And in those regions, now if there's a little bit of push on influence of all the French systems. You go to an office, you cannot speak English to them, they can't speak English to you back. It's crazy. So you go to schools, they're trying to teach, an English teacher has a very heavy French accent that can never teach you proper English. So those are the little things that were happening. You cannot function in a place that was supposed to provide you with that comfort. And that's why the lawyers and teachers and a bunch of other workers stood up to say, I don't want this, you need to rectify this. And when that started, it kind of put pressure now on the government, and then it instigated other people with other grievances.
Okay, to come forward.
And I'm glad Kathleen is here because she has a lot of the history and the background of this situation. We've been suffering as much as it's a country that we love, but it shows that we've been suffering. There's a lot of opportunities that are taken away. Imagine having to have to structure when you're running to write an exam, a government exam. They have to say, okay, no, this person needs to come from this village. You put this person inside, put this person inside. So it's all of those things that people can't take anymore.
Okay.
And the fact that we're very docile and very content, so we needed some kind of little catalyst.
And that's where we are now here. So Kathleen, adding some context to that, what was it looking like before 2016? So even though the protests started in 2016 that preceded what is now this crisis, these are very long-standing, decades-old grievances and situations that governments could have really nipped in the bud before now.
Absolutely, Tolu. Between 1972 and now, and maybe 2016, before this escalated into what it has become today, there has existed discontent by people of the Northwest and Southwest regions, the English-speaking regions of Cameroon, young people, old people, as to how Anglophones are treated in Cameroon. And this discontent has presented itself in either calls for a federation, calls for separation, with movements that have been gathering strength, from different organizations and groups in those regions specifically. Now, at the core of the Anglophone grievance is the loss of the former Southern Cameroons, which was a distinct community defined by differences in official language and inherited colonial traditions of education and law, like Ruth has said, as well as public administration. So basically, in 1972, when the French-speaking République du Cameroun decided to turn the country from a united republic into a republic, from a federal republic, to a united republic, they basically erased the ability of Southern Cameroon to actually administer itself, and by so doing annexed the country. So October 2016 was just a accumulation of all this discontent and this pain that the English-speaking people have experienced for such a long time.
Okay.
And because of the response of the government, where we are.
Okay, so let's talk about that response, Kathleen. Let's stay on that. What was government's response to the protests? And do either one of you think that the response that government gave either inflamed or calmed tensions? Was government able to really identify where it may have its own lapses and seek to amend, or were the actions just simply out there to unfortunately inflame the tension to where Cameroon is right now? Ruth, let me start with you.
I would definitely say inflamed it because they responded with force. The peaceful protest, and that's why I was saying that, I said this before, the lawyers, when they were being hosed down and beaten up, and they did not react, they did not respond. So when you will see them cower down, they will not respond. And I was like, that was a way to go. And they were pushing you to react so that they have a cause to do what they're doing to you. And when the other people rose up, the other civilians rose up to say, I need this and I need that. When the government fought them, they fought back. It's like, I'm tired. And that's the only way. It's like that yin and yang, that hit and hit back. The reaction was even bigger. You're not supposed to do that. Like, they did not come to the table immediately. They did not come. They came to the table when it started looking bad for them. After I think the commission was formed, they came when it was looking bad for them, trying to negotiate. And people are tired. You cannot expect to come and do 1, 2, 3 and then just let them go. And people are tired.
They want more. So Kathleen, you work with governments, you advise them, you help in turn to form policy. And looking at the response of Cameroon's government to what were peaceful protests then, what would you have to say in regards to how the government responded?
The only response that these people know is human rights. And this has shown its face all through the regime of this current ruling elite. You have a group of people who came out to say, we're lawyers, we're teachers, and we're telling you that our sectoral demands for what you are doing to us, marginalizing us, is peaceful, and we want to be able to have you listen to us. They form a consortium, and the first thing you do as a government is arrest them, disband the consortium, don't give an opportunity for dialogue, and then you go ahead to use what I tend to call policy of oppression. So like Ruth said, our governments are very keen on enacting policy that will suppress dissent, that will stifle freedoms, policy that will push back on the ability for people to be civically disobedient. That's the government that we have. The way we advise governments is beyond listening to the people. We need to be able to have stakeholders that can articulate the voice of the people in a way that governments can listen to us. But Tolu, let me just make this clear. What we are experiencing in Cameroon today is a colossal failure of leadership.
Let's talk more now. More than 4,000 people have been killed and over 500,000 people have been forced to flee their homes. This has gone from protests to an all-out war. So who are the players involved other than Cameroonian government? How many separatist groups are involved? Do they agree on the end goals? Have we been able to identify the leaders beyond 3 or 4? Because if it gets to a point where government is willing to come back to the negotiation table or to the mediation table, who would they be talking to? Ruth, who do we know?
Right now, there was a leader who was Bala of the consortium that was created, but he got arrested and he had to denounce the separation movement.
Wow.
And then we have Sisiko, I think, who was in Abuja and he was arrested and repatriated to Cameroon and jailed still. So right now, I don't even know who they can talk to. I don't even think right now anybody wants to talk. Because they had tried to talk. They had tried to talk. They had struggled to negotiate. They had struggled to come to reason, but the government is just adamant about being who they are and what they're doing. They're striving now. They have formed this, I think, a commission of bilingualism where they have put in some people, old men, and I think just one young person, to try to see how they can enact policies to better the Anglophone side of the country. I'm like, but I feel like that's a little bit too late, a little bit of drop of water in the ocean, which is not gonna make any much difference. You need to find somebody to talk to. And you cannot find someone to talk to if they do not trust you. Because right now we've lost all trust in the government, and we need. It's so heartbreaking because you come out, you want what's best for your country, and the country doesn't care because the people want what's best for them to stay in power. We complain about Trump is old, but we have older who've been there for way longer and not trying to move and not trying to listen to the younger generations and see what you can do better.
Okay.
Right now, I don't know how we can proceed with the dialogue, but we need it.
So you hear Ruth saying she doesn't know how Cameroon can proceed with the dialogue, but dialogue at one point in time must happen, Kathleen. We know that talks mediated by Switzerland unfortunately failed in 2019. So in terms of who will be at the table, what are your thoughts on this? Because if no one comes to the table, we don't want Cameroon to go the way of Colombia and the FARC separatist movement, and we have the Tamal separatist movement as well. So those are long-term, historic separatist movements that went into decades and generations. Many people do not think Cameroon can survive that.
Tolu, very well said. I think that one of the most important things we need to do first, because there's so many things to do, but I think we need to prioritize silencing the guns, right? We need to silence these guns. Like you said, too much violence, too many people, the economic cost is astronomical. The lives that have been taken are beyond unimaginable. Sisiku Julius Ayuk Tabe is the Ambazonian separatist leader and the first president of the unrecognized Federal Republic of Ambazonia. And like Ruth said, he's in jail. There are more than 20 unarmed militias currently running amok in this guerrilla warfare in these two regions. You have the Tigers of Ambazonia, you have the Southern Cameroon Defense Forces, you have the Southern Cameroon Restoration Forces, you have the Ambazonia Defense Forces, you have the Ambaland Forces, you have the Manu Ghost Warriors, Red Dragon, Seven Qatar. There's so many.
Do they still all have the same aim at the end of the day? Do they share common goals?
They have political allegiances, which are a bit different. They have allegiances to the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council. Some of them have allegiances to the Ambazonia Governing Council. They have different commanders, and but all of them have the same objective. It's secession, right? That's one faction. You have women's groups, you have organizations, you have even the opposition that is so fundamental to these talks. You also have French-speaking Cameroon. Mind you, Cameroon has increasingly become multilingual from 1972 to today. I am not of the English-speaking Cameroons, but I speak fluent English because the history of Cameroon also caused my grandparents to move to the English-speaking parts of Cameroon. I would essentially identify as an Anglophone. So these different groups must come to the table and have talks with the government to silence the objective would be to silence the guns first. Okay. Anything after that, we can begin to look at other strategies.
Okay, so silencing the guns first. The negotiations or the talks mediated by Switzerland were in 2019. This is now 2020. Those failed. There's been no further conversation on talks. But I now want to talk about the international community. We haven't heard too much from the African Union in regards to this. ECOWAS as well. Many times when there are some of these crises on the African continent, you have a situation where people are always calling for the attention of the United Nations, of America, of France, of course also of the UK, as it may be. And France has a very long history in Cameroon. So where is the international attention? Where is also the possibility of the international pressure that can force all the actors to the group? Do you think the world is paying attention to what's going on in Cameroon?
I really don't think that they're paying attention. I feel like those who respond to it are just trying to give relevance to, I'm looking at it, I feel sorry for you. Okay, take this word, they're gonna write a letter and say, I condemn this, and that's about what they do. Before, back in the day, what France would do to Cameroon, if there was something that was going on, France is going to hold Cameroonian hostage financially. Those are little things that they could have done, but right now, nobody wants to step in and do anything. And like I said before, the constitution of Cameroon is very wobbly to a point where you don't know where you're standing. So that's how I feel like the UN has not been able to really ground them. All they can condemn is, we don't want the genocide, we don't want the massacre, because the only way for the international community to come and function here is through the government, and government is not even trying to do anything either.
So, Kathleen, do you agree in terms of having the attention or the pressure from the West, as we might term it? And of course, adding to that, many Africans are saying Africa needs to look inside. We can't always be waiting for those outside of the continent to help us solve our issues. The AU, ECOWAS.
The most silent of all of these internal regional bodies is CEMAC. CEMAC is the Central African Regional Bloc, right? And I mean, this is the most disappointing regional bloc on the continent, if you ask me. By the way, it's not surprising that they're silent. The reason being that Cameroon is the top dog of that bloc, unfortunately, right? So CEMAC has been largely silent. The African Union until 2019 remained silent, but in July of 2019 welcomed the upcoming Swiss mediated talks like you talked about. That failed. The Commonwealth in November 2019 expressed support for a peace process initiated by the Cameroon government. They were specific about that. The European Union in June 2018, I think, supported the entry of UN bodies to the Anglophone region and called on the government to allow these bodies to come in. I think that the bodies were groups, humanitarian access, really, to help those who were victims of the crisis. The UN has called, since 2018, has been condemning and calling on peace talks and a peaceful resolution. And then I think most recently, we've heard from the Pope, which is why I told you about how important the church is to Cameroon. We've also heard from the Foreign Relations Committee at the U.S. Congress that is calling on peaceful resolutions and for all groups to lay arms down. The U.S. has relations with Cameroon. One thing I need to say, Tolu, is that we need to go beyond the condemnations and the calling for and all these peaceful press releases and pressers. We need to go beyond that to actually enacting action, like Ruth said. It is an aberration and an anomaly that after 4 years and such complete devastation, which has led to what we're now seeing, kids being killed in school, sanctions are not being spoken of, at least individual sanctions on those who are continually perpetrating this violence. Yeah. We know these people, and it's about time that the international community puts that pressure on them. And maybe we as Cameroonians also need to put pressure on those points to actually generate the responses that we need.
Okay, so you've mentioned the school children, and the crisis has affected school children, but never reached the level of the Kumba shooting. Now, in July 2019, close to 6,000 schools had been shut down across the Anglophone regions, and this affected more than 600,000 children. But now, October 2020, we see school children becoming victims. I have to ask, Ruth, what do you think has changed?
Initially, they were not just sending kids out of school, they were kidnapping the kids and asking for ransom from the parents. They'll hold them, either the parents pay up or they're going to transform the kids to Ambazonia fighters. But now I feel like they've gotten bolder because recently there was the GCE results that came out. That means kids out and they roll and they pass and they're celebrating. And I feel like the setback, I feel like their pressure was not being felt. So they went extra above and beyond. And I feel like these are a bunch of rogue people because this has not happened before. This has never happened before. They have burned down the schools, I've seen it. They have burned down hospitals, I've seen it. Burned down churches, I've seen that. But going and opening fire on kids,
that's a new level.
That's a new level, and that shows that there's either this destabilization where they are in their camp, or they have gotten bolder as a whole.
Kathleen, what do you think? Because earlier you referenced about 20 militia that are creating havoc, as we may have it in the regions right now. But now we see school children becoming targets. What do you think changed? Is it a central order? As of now, no one has claimed responsibility for what happened in the school, but what has changed?
The hallmark of the secessionist movement has been a stop to education in these two regions. That's been the bane, that's been the hallmark. there isn't a cognitive reason as to why a group of people who are requesting for less marginalization or no marginalization, which if you ask me is their basic right, would be to stop, their own from going to school. What has changed here is the fact that the drivers of this hallmark understand that the people are as resolute as ever. You had militia groups attacking civilian populations, and I'm sure a lot of us have been affected. My family has personally been affected by kidnaps. You also had the military, attacking villages and civilian populations. That changed the dynamic of the support that the communities could have had for the separatist fighters. And because of that change in the dynamic, a lot of the populations began thinking, we need to be more resolute. We need to begin to own our communities. Our economy has been destroyed. Our girls are being raped. Our children are out of school. We will stand up to the government forces that are killing us and the separatists that are violating us. And I think that whoever is behind this attack got to the point where they thought, if they're standing up to me, then I need to escalate this. And I think another reason is that whenever a criminal mind gets away with one crime, guess what? They take it a notch higher.
And it's unfortunate because many are worried that there will be further escalation. But before we wrap up, there has to be a conversation about solutions. So Ruth, I'm going to ask you, in terms of going forward from where we are now with the Cameroon crisis, what do you think the solutions are? Kathleen, the same question goes to you when she's done.
I feel like we're going to start what I said before, dialogue. And for this to happen, I feel the Sisiko in jail needs to be spoken to because he still has a hold over the Amazonia Council. They need to talk. There needs to be dialogue. There needs to be a representative who can look at him as like somebody in authority, because he does have authority to negotiate with us. Like, put your guns down. That's the first thing. We're not trying to, we're not saying we're not separating the country, but just put your guns down. Because these people that you're claiming to be fighting for, those are people who are suffering. Those are people who are not getting an education. Those are people who are not getting their livelihoods. You're burning down stores. Put down your weapons. Let's talk. So the government needs to swallow their pride as well and go talk to the man, because guess what? No matter whether you like it or not, he's got some authority that he's wielding to empower. Okay, Kathleen, your thoughts on solutions?
If you ask me, this is a governance-related problem. You look at history, it tells you that it's a governance-related problem. And I think the long-term solution is complete political transition in Cameroon. Enough, we can no longer have 38 years of constitutional anarchy, right? That's the long-term solution. The immediate solution is to silence the guns. We need to conclude and uphold an immediate ceasefire in all the areas of the northwest and the southwest of Cameroon. That's the first thing. We need to guarantee unfettered access to humanitarian efforts for those who have been affected in those areas. We need policy that makes sense to the people.
Okay, Kathleen, that's a very fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much, Ruth Kweti and Kathleen Ndoma, for joining me on News Central to discuss the Cameroon crisis. We'll be keeping an eye on that situation, and as developments come about, we'll be bringing them to you. Thank you again, Ruth. Thank you again, Kathleen. This is News Central.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Tolulokwe Adileru Balogun.